Hello, hello, and welcome again to another episode of Building Experience with Mark. I'm Mark, and great to have another show. Episode 16, would you believe it? What a difference COVID has made to all our lives. Never thought we'd be doing a live stream show for this long, but here we are. Anyway, thanks for the feedback around topics you'd like to see, and had a lot of interest in digital signage, so I thought I'd bring the best of the best in today. So let's get straight into it, introduce our guests. Good morning, good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, Mark.
Good morning. Hey, Mark. Hey, Jim.
Welcome to you both.
Hey,
it's great to have you on the show first time.
great to be here.
Expecting amazing things, I'm sure. So how about we just start with some introductions. Jim, I might start with you. Do you want to explain who you are and what you do at Adobe?
Sure. So my name is Jim Stoklosa, and I am the Senior Product Manager for AEM Screens with Adobe. I've been with Adobe for 5 years. In fact, I just recently got my 5-year
congratulations.
award. You can see there.
Yep.
Very excited. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I have been part of the digital signage industry for a very long time. And it was just a tremendous opportunity to be able to come in and help to shepherd this product along and bring it through its maturation phases that we've gone through over the last 5 years. But it's been an amazing journey, and we're just getting started. We're very happy to be here. Thanks.
Fantastic. We'll come back to that important topic in just a moment. But Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Andrew, Clarke. I'm one of the solution consultants in Adobe Australia, ANZ, that focus on AEM. So anything content related is anything that kind of fits within my remit. Been with Adobe for nearly 5 years, Jim, so just behind you. But you've been working in the content management space for quite a number of years and worked with kind of previous vendors as well for Adobe. But digital signage is one of the great things about Experience Manager, and I love being able to interact with content. I'm a very visual person, so seeing it on a screen in a physical space is awesome.
Yeah, so I think that is our featured topic of today. So let's get straight into that. All right, so today we're going to talk about digital signage, and obviously there's a big growing demand for it in the market. So, Jim, you mentioned already you've got a background in digital signage. What's different now? Like, what are you seeing change in the last 5 years versus digital signage is not new, but I think there's absolutely a growing demand, right?
Yeah, and the expectation around quality and just a higher level of information. The days of just kind of looping just general ads, just providing that experiential element, those days are really numbered in terms of brands and retailers being able to really communicate and giving a voice to that space. So what we're seeing is a trend in elevating those experiences in public spaces and going just beyond that experiential and providing a higher level of engagement and paying off on that investment that someone is making when someone enters a space and makes that decision to actually look at a screen and actually consume that content. We want to make sure that there's a payoff,
Yeah,
that we're providing good information to them. We're helping them along this journey. That maybe this is a path to a purchase, or maybe it's using a service like in a fitness center or even a hospital. If I'm getting information, wayfinding information. So we want there to be that payoff on that investment. And there's what I've seen in recent years is there's a much more a targeted focus on paying off on that investment.
yeah. Andrew?
Yeah, I'll take it from another side of the equation, and I'm seeing a lot more of our customers want to deliver a more consistent your message to their customers. So having the content and the marketing teams working in the same platform to deliver those consistent experiences definitely been something that we've seen a lot of our customers looking at, increasing their efficiency as well from that authoring perspective. With COVID especially, even though there's less people here in Australia that when you're in lockdown, you can't go and visit those stores, but there's still are stores operating. There are still organisations who are having to send people out into COVID hotspots, employees actually, to go and preview and tell report back to their business owners what those screens are displaying. So yeah, even internal employee processes is important in this kind of space as well.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, we've gone through the wave of, any old TV with a USB stick in the side, and, we'll just courier out a change and rely on the, in branch or in store staff to go and, change that out to, a wave of connectivity. But I think you're right, Jim. You mentioned it's the expectations have gone from simple branding to like actually tell me information. And I think the last 18 to 24 months have been really interesting as far as store closures, and can I actually be here now? And I go to the store and it's closed, and that only chance of interaction is the digital signage to actually say, hey, we're closed at the moment, but you can contact us online or however. So Jim, we might pivot and talk about why Adobe? Well, like, why is Adobe in this space?
Well, first and foremost, Adobe has always held a very prominent position in digital signage from a creative perspective. So our creative cloud tools are the industry standard when it comes to creating content for digital signage experiences. So that, coupled with the fact that Adobe Experience Manager, specifically sites and assets or digital asset management platform, are really dominant in terms of enterprise web delivery. And web channels and in-venue digital signage channels are very similar. There's some distinct differences, of course. but from an experiential perspective, when that path to purchase um, that the consumer is going through will normally hit a variety of touch points, not just one. And so you want those touch points to really be consistent throughout that journey, and not just that initial journey of, am I going to buy product A versus product B, but sort of that idea of cradle to grave. A lot of brands really value that long-term relationship with the consumer. I'm not just buying a pair of shoes today, but I'm going to be buying another pair of shoes probably next month potentially, or in a
Yeah.
few months. At least in my case, I tend to buy a lot of shoes. But they want to own that consistent experience throughout. And of course, it touches on so many different areas, from social to email campaigns to even traditional channels like print and television advertising. And so, kind of bringing them all together and having a cohesive strategy for all of them really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so. And Andrew, to your point before around the internal effort to get to that point, right, is, we've seen so many teams fractured in the way that they communicate with the customer. And this goes beyond marketing. Like a lot of the time, the ownership of a retail location is outside of marketing, of the team who look after, the online presence. And so there's a strong opportunity that there's a disjointed experience between them. So, as far as a desire from brands, what are you seeing as far as overcoming this challenge?
Yeah, you're right. I was speaking to a customer the other day, and they were explaining to me the process of getting content out to their some of their systems, and it was copy a file here and copy it there, and then it gets FTP here, and then there's no marketing control around that content, and there's definitely large opportunities for errors and mistakes to happen in that. And you mentioned it earlier. If you do need to prioritize messaging to customers, that the effort of doing that in the traditional systems can be quite onerous. But with the experience manager and that whole creative cloud base and omni-channel content creation capabilities, there's so many opportunities to factor in automation to really drive efficiency and allow the marketing team to focus on delivering those experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I'm showing my age here, but I have a strong print background, and I remember that any campaign that you wanted to roll out, you'd have to do it well in advance to allow time for the print process, and then the web team would come after and go, oh, well, we're very nimble, we can throw something up. And digital signage is kind of going through the same wave. It used to be, well, I've got to get everything ready so I can distribute it and get all the all the distribution out of the way. But now the opportunity is to just be right on par with what we're doing in the rest of our channels. So Jim, AEM Screens is your baby. Do you want to talk about what you're doing with the product, and maybe for those who haven't seen it before, maybe give a quick overview?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first and foremost, what we're doing with AEM, just in general as a platform, is making sure that we're taking the best of what we can deliver with sites and assets, and maintaining that omni-channel, that level of personalization, and taking the best of that, but combining it with the demands, the very specific demands of digital signage. So I'm going to just share with you.
Yeah.
I can walk you through a product that doing just a screen share here. I'm logged into an author instance of Adobe Experience Manager, and just to show you. And this is probably a screen I know you're very familiar with, and Andy, you are as well. But there are some core products within the entire platform, and there's some functionality that Screens is sort of built on top of. So Screens, as a digital signage, as a dedicated digital signage CMS, is built on top of these solutions. And so we leverage a thing called a channel, which is actually a page inside of sites. So these icons, when you look at this and you see assets here, and you see forms and commerce and personalization, those are all things that are available to a marketer who is targeting a digital signage channel, an in-venue channel for building an experience, but wants to leverage these other areas within the overall platform. So first and foremost, what we're doing with the product is providing a way to manage various objects. So these objects are locations. They're things related to where a particular experience is going to be delivered. So we have the ability to provide a hierarchy of locations, whatever makes sense for the customer. So if they have country-based or something called region or zone, or however they want to do it, down all the way to the very specific actual screen that is going to be in that physical location. So all of that can be managed within the platform. But additionally, we have a couple of other objects that are very important. One of those is a channel object, or this concept of a channel, which again is basically like a page in AEM. And this is where I'm combining like content. So I'm building these experiences and orchestrating them and building loops of content. And then the other major piece is the actual device. So this is where we are actually going through a registration or an authentication process for authenticating that device and validating that the communication that we're going to have to that device, which is handled through something we call the device manager here, where we're able to look at all of these different parameters and look at channel assignments and the operating system and versioning and connectivity. All of those things are managed through the platform. So we're bringing that content piece with what we kind of think of as the service provider piece and bringing that together so that we're really leveraging the best of both of them.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it before, Jim, when you were talking about the channels, yeah, and that being a page within AEM. So the authors who are creating experiences in their sites, so building out those digital experience for their website, they're actually using the same editor and the same method for creating content on those screens. So in the traditional experience manager way that people are dragging and dropping componentry onto a page, like an image component or a teaser component or a button component, they're doing the exact same thing as they would be doing on a site when they're actually creating that content and that channel within screens. So there's I'm going to go back to that efficiency word that I mentioned earlier, is that the teams that are working in creating content for their digital experiences can reuse the way they're working in the exact same way and build out content, knowing that that they're doing it the same way and the experience is going to be the same.
Yeah, and I think if you go beyond that and you say, okay, well, I'm running multiple websites, I'm running multiple mobile apps, etc. Digital signage just plays into that as well. And by having the same tool set, you've got a sharing of skills, so I don't have to learn multiple platforms. The tech stack is the same, so my DevOps and all that process is streamlined. But then the content reuse, I think, is one of the key things, right? And how do I coordinate, all these different launches if I'm running a promotion, etc. And by the way, I think this might work. Let's just see if the technology works for me. But I had here somewhere, maybe it's this button. And maybe it's none of these buttons, and it's just not going to work for me. But I was hoping to show you a couple of different, technology fail. But yeah, it happens. Better my demo than your demo. But having a promotion or a campaign like an offer to say, $50 off today only. If you think about the way that we would launch that today in the digital world, it's very easy to say, hey, we've got a dip in sales, we want to run a promotion, we want to get the creative done, and we want to get it in market today, right? That is something that, 10 years ago, people go, no, there's no way I could get through my organization in that time. We're now there with digital signage as well. Like if you want to make a change in your retail brands today, you can do that. And the difference is now I can run that, to Jim's point around the customer journey. If you think, okay, what's the likelihood that someone's going to be on, this device and then go in store and have a consistent experience, I can actually create that content once and roll it out across those different channels. So what I'm really talking about is like omni-channel approaches here. And Jim, I think you've got some teed up a few examples of what some of our customers are doing with like single page applications and how they're driving personalization. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so let me jump back in here and give you an example. And since you brought it up, so I have an example here of a text overlay. So one of the things that we like to talk with customers about is the difference between, and here you see it here, you mentioned it on sale, doing that custom messaging dynamically. So resolving this dynamically and doing it very quickly. So there's a difference between server-side flattening and client-side flattening of these experiences. And we can actually accomplish both. So Assets is incredibly powerful in our ability to set up a workflow. And that text could actually be embedded in that image if I so desired. And I could essentially resolve that server side and proliferate that experience out to all of my stores or whatever particular group of stores using tagging. But what I can also do is I can also set it up as a text overlay. And that's what we have here, an example of using Context Hub. So Context Hub can not only be used to actually trigger content change, but it can also be used as text overlay for being able to show information. So in this case, I have this 499 here. So if I were to, just make a change inside of a database, I'm just using an example of Google Sheets, but here I could have a pricing database. When I navigate back to this player application, you're going to notice that that overlay has now been updated. So I'm essentially updating in real time this information that I'm able to show. So I think right after this image, I'm just kind of coming into the loop randomly. But here you see that that 599 has now been changed to, or 499 has been changed to 495.
Yeah, that's great. And just to be clear, it's any data source, so it's connecting to the source of truth rather than creating yet another place to update information.
Right. So the local player is able to execute on an API. It can execute on a listener to a local sensor type of event, or in this case, it could be tied to a POS system, a pricing system. But I actually have a variety of use cases set up here. So, for example, if this particular screen had a camera, and we detected that the person standing in front of the screen was actually a child, that could be reflected here in a local database. And now what you'll notice is what the player is going to do is it's going to resolve to essentially what we would refer to as a custom offer. And now instead of seeing the man climbing on the rocks, you're seeing a small child swimming in a swimming pool. And so this is yet another example of how we execute on data triggers. Another thing that we can do with inventory is we can have certain products. You may have noticed that there was a blue bicycle helmet being resolved in the loop because that's what we happen to have in stock of bicycle helmets. If I were to change the inventory status for this particular item in red, what you're going to notice now as I navigate back to the player is now it is going to resolve to, I believe it's red flip-flops as we continue to go through the loop of content. What's going to happen is that we're going to resolve and see a targeted product because we have a lot of inventory of flip-flops, in this case, red flip-flops. We are going to be advertising that. So this can be incredibly powerful because not only are we enabling authors to be able to execute on these tasks, but we're actually now porting intelligence down to the player where player can start to make some decisions. We can start to combine some of these campaigns together and essentially create algorithms that say part of the decisioning, and this is based on like using Adobe Analytics and Adobe Target, which we can also combine with Adobe Experience Manager, where we can look at campaigns holistically and start to make some decisions around sensor activity, camera activity, maybe it's web traffic, maybe it's the amount of inventory of items that we have. And we can start to make some holistic decisions around what we should be advertising. That's the player executing on that. And this is all completely rules based that can then leverage AI to continue to modify those rules and also track the effectiveness of those rules. Are those items being purchased that we're advertising? How effective are these ad campaigns actually turning out to be? In measuring those and looking at that overall ROI. So that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And first of all, I'd say that the creative, you've just taken some imagery here, but of course it's any creative you want, any design you want in there. But the point being that you're really driving that connectivity, just like you would in a personalized web experience. You're bringing that into those locations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that data flow can actually occur through AEM. So we have customers, we have one customer, for example, that's using a Hypers connector for product information. And so that product data is being distributed out to all the players separately from the underlying images and then flattened. But that information is actually coming through AEM. However, there's also the option for the player itself to execute on local APIs. And it can communicate to a backend database. It can communicate or have a listener for simple things like ASCII data, for example. So the player itself has that ability, and that even to the extent of being able to execute in a disconnected state, because unfortunately we do find that there are certain players that may have compromised internet connectivity at certain times of day for whatever reason, and any local trigger event can still be executed on. So all of that information, all that instruction, all that data, and all the assets that the player needs are all ported down to the player, so it can execute locally.
Yeah. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a low code, no code environment to go and set up these rules, but to empower, the owners of the environment to have the controls rather than doing change requests, back to a development team to go and do these rollouts.
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, you even enabling the organization's optimization team who would sit within Adobe Target, for example, just doing their job. They don't need to know about what's happening on the screen necessarily, but their job is to optimize experiences, and they can do that as well within the landscape of the Adobe tech too.
Yeah, so let's just take a moment to talk through some use cases, because we're talking about digital signage, but obviously there's different ways. People might think of a monitor in a store window, but what are we seeing? So like the use case you just talked through, Jim, around different pricing, like where would I expect to see that?
That's really prominent in the QSR market, for example. So we see a lot of dynamic pricing going on for fast food chains and fast casual. Another place where you see it very prominently is flight information displays at the airport. That's rapidly changing data that's absolutely critical. And, so many of us, in fact, I would venture to say the vast majority of us, of course, have the ability to use our phones. But how many times have we found ourselves in an airport and, we're low on battery life, or we're trying to do other things on our phone? We're trying to, read a PDF or respond to a loved one via text or, check email. So having those flight information displays and just displays in general in public spaces, that again is getting back to that overall point where we want to be bringing as much value as we possibly can to these experiences. And of course, flight information displays have been around for a very long time, but it's one of the most critical, and useful pieces of digital signage that you will see out there. And QSRs is another example of them. And both of them use text overlay, where they're doing dynamic, resolving dynamically the text that's being shown.
Yeah, I think there's a trend there as well. Just as the technology advances as well. But Andrew, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say that there's also employee experience is kind of seeing that quite a lot as well, which is using data to deliver relevant content. So we have partners in Europe who I believe integrated into weather and transport systems to notify their staff of potential travel delays in getting home. Internally at Adobe, we use screens to inform our staff, and we also have other customers who use screens in their lunchrooms to enable their staff to learn about new product releases as well. So
Yeah.
that's another kind of a big focus or use case I'm seeing recently too.
Yeah, I actually really used to like when we were all in the same office. You go in the lunchroom and there'd be introducing new staff, and it'd be localized to your office. So even though it was a worldwide deployment, you could actually have personalized content to your location. And we're already hearing, as offices are opening up and there's return to work policies, and particular guidelines, it's having that information right where people need it versus saying go to a website and it's there if you remember to look for it. So it's all about that timely nature. But Jim, going back to you, one of the trends we're seeing in the web space is around investment in single page applications, and a lot of investment. And so while we've gone from images in digital signage to HTML in digital signage, as people are starting to say, oh, well, no, I actually just need to build an application and I'll get my dev team to do that. What's your view on how we manage that and how we, again, leverage, reuse from web into digital signage?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that, Mark, because, historically, you really only had two choices. If you're using a traditional digital signage CMS that's giving you a canvas, and it looks a lot like tools that you might use to build a presentation. So if you're doing something fairly simplistic, those tools can do the job. They're very drag and drop. So you're dragging a box onto a canvas that you're making into a button, and you're binding that touch event to maybe the next page or something in that experience. So if they're fairly simplistic, you can get away with that. But if they're fairly complicated and sophisticated experiences that you're wanting to deliver, and the reality is that most of our customers do want to experience that level of sophistication, those tools are really not up to the job. Well, the other extreme of that arc is that you, as you alluded to, you hire a developer to build out a single page app for you. But the problem with that is, you're unlikely to get your layouts perfectly right the first time. So as you build that application and you're going from prototyping, maybe you're using Adobe XD, for example, for prototyping, you're wireframing, you're moving all the way out to an application. Once you've actually gotten it out there, you can start to heat map, how people are actually interacting. How often are they interacting? Are there some trouble spots with the user interface? And then you want to go back and make changes. You want to modify those experiences over time. And the worst part is you have to go back to the developer every time, and you have to deal with their timelines, and you have to deal with the cost associated with that. And so wouldn't it be nice if I could combine the necessity to get this properly developed, beautiful experience, but then have it available in my authoring environment so that I can make changes and modifications to it. And that's exactly what we allow for with the SPA editor. So I can show another demo here, Mark, if you like. Yeah, so I have just a demo here of a product recommender. So this could be an interactive experience. It could be sort of an endless aisle product catalog. I recently had the experience to return a pair of pants, and there was an interactive experience in the store, and it was actually very helpful. I engaged with it probably for about 15 or 20 minutes. It really helped me to understand the best pair of pants for me. So these experiences can be a wide range from dispensing, ticketing, different types of product dispensing machines, all the way through to product information. So in this case, we have a generic kind of interactive product recommender that's going to ask me a series of questions, and I'm going to answer these questions, and in the end, it is going to recommend a product to me. And this is the product that it's recommending to me. And that works really great. But maybe, let's just say for the sake of argument, that I find over time that I see a lot of activity on that center button. And I'm kind of wondering if the placement of that button is really appropriate. So to that point I was making earlier of just how easy it is to go in and make a modification. So in my spa, these are the four areas that are actually involved. And I'm going to focus in on the skill area. And I'm going to go to the edit button. Now this is the channel editor. These are components that some of your viewers may be familiar with. And as I click on the wrench icon to actually edit, so here are my buttons, and you can see I have the beginner, intermediate, and advanced in that order. And if for whatever reason I decide, you know what, a lot of people are pressing the advanced, but maybe they're not really as advanced as they claim to be, maybe I want to kind of move that intermediate button over to the side just to see if that kind of makes a change. So just to show you how easy that is, I can navigate back to screens and look at that that interactive spa again. And now what I see when I go through this experience is that the skill level has now changed, and beginner is in the middle. So, I have that feeling that people are just constantly hitting that. So I'm heat mapping it, and 8 out of every 10 times they're hitting that middle button. So I want to kind of test and think about the overall experience. And I can do this with any of the areas in here. I can change labels. I can change, the flow, move cards around, and really modify these experiences as I'm seeing how people use it actually out in the field, so that I can optimize it and, obviously try to make it the best experience that I can. Again, getting back to that thing we talked about at the very beginning, that payoff. So often we will invest time into a digital experience in a public space only to be fairly disappointed with the outcome. We didn't get the amount of information we thought we were going to get, or, it was just an overt sales pitch, but it didn't bring any value. And so this is a way that we can really help to fine tune these experiences and make sure they're really truly bringing value and bringing a brand or a retailer closer to the consumer.
Yeah. Andrew, what are you saying?
Yeah, I love that example. It's bringing the actual content author closer to the customer at the end of the day. And it's just meaning that they can be reactive to trends. Maybe they've got different times of day that they need to have different content up. But the idea is that rather than focusing on the developer having to go through that release process of making a change, you're empowering the content author and the marketer to get as close as they can to the customer.
And let's also think about realistically, like we've all been to a big box store or somewhere where they've got this beautiful investment in technology and these beautiful campaigns, yet there's still a handwritten $50 off sign because it's a floor stock damaged item, and the local team aren't empowered, right? So it's about giving access back in a non-code way, and maybe there's a lightweight layer of training to say, okay, here is the page that you can edit, and here is, the permissions you have, etc. But, that's 20 minutes of induction, not, an extensive course. And then they're empowered to actually go and input or make those changes.
Yeah, and because all of this is built on top of Experience Manager platform itself, all of those controls around security and access and authentication, what people can and can't do, is just all built into the system. So, the content management part of building screens is just leveraging the best in breed technology, which is awesome.
Yeah. So my last question for both of you is, what are you seeing changing? So I'll give you one example. Jim, the example that you showed there was immediately like, oh, I have to touch a screen, and I don't know if I want to touch a screen anymore because I don't know who touched the screen before me. So I know that we've got customers who are investing in voice. There's, vision experiences where there's a camera, as you mentioned before. But, what else are you seeing that you think might actually have an impact on digital signage?
I think probably one of the biggest ones that we're seeing is a trend towards a connected experience between a mobile device and a digital experience that's being provided in venue. This could be accomplished through, something simple like maybe reading a QR code
Yeah.
with my phone. And so there are different methods and different ways of doing that. You can just the easiest method is both devices just sort of communicate through the cloud. And there's some trade-offs there with speed, but it really accommodates for anybody with any kind of phone. You just pull out your camera, scan QR code, and pushes you up to a URL. There are some other methods for direct connection as well, maybe Bluetooth or using beaconing. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we're seeing going on with people getting really creative, as you mentioned, with camera, with voice, and with also trying to connect or tether a mobile experience, someone's personal device, to the public experience that's being provided to them.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. Andrew, what are you seeing?
Yes, similar kind of thoughts as well. Is definitely that connection between the mobile app and the customer, and where they are in location, and potentially even understanding there might be a group of people in a certain location that have a segment that predominantly like a particular type of product, and they can start to customize or personalize those experiences to that broad segment. So yeah, there's definitely customers in Australia who are taking that approach now with regards to understanding who's in location and what they like and what their behaviours and signals are, and presenting content to them.
Yeah, yeah. I think, Jim, your comment. I'd much rather touch this device than a strange device, right? Because I touch this thing all day, and it's probably got more germs on it than somebody else. But that's a whole nother story. But like, it actually goes back to that omni-channel experience, right? We really need to take a step back, and although we've talked about digital signage today, it's one step of that overall customer journey, and that drives the need to think about content, across all these experiences. How do I author once and reuse, and work through all of that. So, look, for both of you, thank you very much for joining today. Any final words of wisdom or advice you want to share with everyone?
I think just for me, just a real quick couple things. Number one, I think, when it comes to omni-channel, it's important to remember that brands invest so much in creating brand guidelines that unfortunately are channel specific, right? So they're focused on a web experience and maybe a mobile experience. And if we're lucky, maybe a third experience, which is mobile app. Mm-hmm. But those brand guidelines, a lot of times are not applied to a lot of the other channels. And that just adds to that disjointedness of the experience. The other piece of advice I would mention, and we have something available in our help docs, it's available for free, is just helping people to understand, the path to deployment and what is really involved in making those transitions from creating a strategy brief to a design brief to ultimately an installation or a deployment brief. And those major buckets are very important. And oftentimes, not only with us, but I just know in general in the industry, some steps are occasionally skipped for reasons related sometimes to budgeting and whatever. But it's very important to, as best you can, maintain a consistent approach, looking at your strategy. Why am I putting this out here? What value am I bringing? Because so many pieces have interdependencies. And if we're not taking those dependencies into account, we can end up making a decision that we want to put out a video that has sound to a display that has no speakers.
Yeah.
And, stuff like that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody ever really goes back and fixes it. And you go into a public space and you're like, it doesn't make any sense. This experience just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And it happens all too often because a step, gets skipped. So follow a brief where you're going from strategy to design to deployment.
Wise words. Andrew, can you top that?
No, I can't top that, but I'll keep it short and sweet. I think your words of wisdom, experience manager, sites, assets, and screens, industry leaders, you're going to get the benefit of so much capability within the platform to really, I guess, express your experiences out to your customers. And more than happy to chat to anyone if they reach out and want to discuss it further.
Great, sounds good. All right. Well, we're almost at the end again, but again, Andrew, Jim, a great thank you from me for your time today. I think, the comments will speak for themselves, but, I've learned a lot, and, it's always good to talk. Can we get you back on the show maybe next year to share some more innovation?
Would love to.
That'd be fantastic.
Definitely more coming.
Okay, sounds good. And, for the audience, if you're watching, again, remember that, feel free to write in and or add a comment or hit me up directly on LinkedIn, etc. If there's a particular topic you'd love to hear more about, or if there's a topic or, someone at Adobe you'd like to hear firsthand from. But let's leave it there. Andrew, Jim, thank you very much for again for your time today, and let's wrap up the show. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark.